Welcome to another episode of Yesshift, a father-son podcast by Dan Schinder and Stephen Schinder about the band Yes. Previously, we reviewed the book Yes in the 1980s by Stephen Lambe with David Watkinson. And now, here they are with us on this episode. Enjoy!
Hey everybody, how's it going? Dan Schinder here on Yesshift. And we're thrilled to have with us today the authors of a really cool book that Stephen and I just read and reviewed yesterday, if you're watching this live. It's Yes in the 1980s. Whoop, that's the wrong book. Actually, Bill Bruford paid me $5 to do that. Yes in the 1980s. Stephen, why don't you have the honors of... Does David have his great? Yeah, but is yours, guys, autographed by you guys? Yeah. Steve, why don't you do the honors and we'll launch into a little bit of Yes News and then we're going to talk about the book.
Yes are still playing Close to the Edge for England and Ireland this summer, but they've announced that the mainland European dates delayed to next year will include Relayer, and there's also a rumor flowing around that they might also do Relayer for the US in October.
Right. And as David indicated, I believe Stephen Lambe is quite not happy with this.
Well, yeah, obviously I was looking forward to seeing Relayer like everybody else, and I've seen them play Close to the Edge many, many times before. So it's, although I get it completely, it's nothing special. I'd also like to just shout out for the poor European fans who are having to wait till next year anyway. And I presume, Dave, you might know better, but I presume that's because whereas things are kind of back to normal in terms of attendances and numbers that can be in venues in the UK, it's not quite that simple in Europe. So the band have decided not to do European dates this year because presumably they can't fill halls like they would like to, so the attendances would be down. Is that right, David?
Saying they can't fill holes like they used. I just think there's so much logistics involved in all.
No, I mean they can't fill halls because of the COVID restrictions rather than the.
I get you.
Rather than attendances.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, there's so much in Europe going on, which can affect, between now and next tour of next year. Anything can happen, really.
Yeah.
So you've got to pencil it in, but there's a lot of borders near other borders beyond music here and beyond COVID. So, it must be an absolute nightmare, to be honest, to be a manager and a planner and an agent and whatever to stick this in. We've got it. We've got a bit of Close to the Edge. And these guys are going to get Relayer. I'd love Relayer rather than Close to the Edge, but and we've all booked Relayer, and we're not going to get it.
I'm going to go, obviously.
I'm going to 3, and I even looked at booking up 3 in Europe for Relayer to go and see. After the first 3 gigs in Europe, I thought they'll have it nailed a little better than the first one, maybe. So 3 gigs in, Spain, Portugal. Anyway, so anything could happen. It's I don't know. It's a funny old time, but the Americans are going to get Relayer. We'll get it at some point, won't we?
Yeah, and I've only seen, the only thing I've seen in person of Relayer is from the symphonic tour, and that's it in person. And in fact, to my memory, Steve will correct me if I'm wrong because he's got a much better memory than I do. To my memory, I've never seen another Yes keyboard player play anything from Relayer other than Tom Brislin on the symphonic tour at the Hollywood Bowl, and a video that Stephen found of his band playing Sound Chaser, which was unbelievable. I've never seen Jeff or anybody else, so I'm curious.
I've seen Jeff play on the Royal Affair tour.
How was it? How was it? Not just his playing, but also the keyboard sounds. Was he getting like those old, 75 sounds or whatever that Patrick had?
I really loved the performance of Gates of Delirium on that tour. It felt very authentic. I thought the band did a great job there. It sounded very close to the album to my ears anyway, and it was just so energetic, and loved being in the presence of that, pun intended.
I've never seen them play anything from Relayer, because the night I went to the symphonic tour, they didn't play Gates of Delirium.
Really?
Yeah. Now, for some reason, they dropped it. So just for that show, don't know why. So best I've seen is Steve Howe doing an acoustic version of "To Be Over."
Oh wow, I remember that too from the Full Circle tour, right?
Yeah, I think I saw him do it at a Steve Howe solo show as well.
Yeah.
Or his band, Remedy, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah, I saw them. I think he did it in one of their shows as well.
Interesting.
So that's the best I got, really.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. But let's get into the book. First of all, two very avid, I'm guessing, pretty much lifelong Yes fans.
Yeah.
Briefly, how did you two meet? And how did you decide, hey, let's write stuff together?
Well, we met doing this, really.
Okay.
I love that book.
Just a point of clarity. I don't know whether you guys have realized, but Sonic One Publishing is me.
Yes.
So I own Sonic One Publishing. So, which is, if you want to write a book and you want to get it published, own your own publishing company is a good plan. So, how did we first? I've forgotten, Dave.
I got in touch with you as a lifesaver because that book I was there. That was 5 years' work.
Yeah.
And my publisher was being very slow, which was the same publisher as Perpetual Change.
Of course.
They were happy to do the second one. It was all dragging on, and I was getting very frustrated with the time frame. And so I kind of looked around and thought, there must be someone who can take this on. And it's a really tough thing to do, is to cancel a publisher. Because just get one first.
Yeah.
And someone who actually thinks you're good enough to do. So, which they had great faith in me, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, or what it was.
Yeah.
They had, so to actually drop a publisher and be nice to them and them nice to me, and find somebody else like the wonderful man in front of you, who came flying in his publishing cape. And I said, I've got all this stuff that nobody's got and nobody's written about, and it's taken me 5 years, and it's literally, groundbreaking in the history of John Anderson for the early days. Can you, come over, let me show you everything, and let me see what you think, see if it's any good.
Yes,
there it is.
Because you'd seen my first book. You had my first book, didn't you? Which is that one.
I collect books. I've got about 30 of them.
Yeah, not of that one, obviously, but yeah, there are a lot of which you did. So yeah, that's how we got together. And I said, yeah, I'll publish it. So we sort of pulled it all together, first in a hardback edition. Well, this is a rare hardback version.
Wow.
Because we only did them. We did a single edition. So I've got one, I think.
Yeah.
And then we did it in in paperback the following year. So that's how we got together.
But I was very, very particular, and because Stephen does his set. I know. He does his set way with his books, and I said I don't want that. It needs to be done like this. But he was, because he's a Yes fan, he got it. He got that I needed everything in there, everything or nothing.
It caused my designer a nervous breakdown. Oh, nearly caused you. Sorry, Hugh. But no, it turned out really, really well in the end. So that's how we first met. So I actually knew when I started planning Yes in the 80s, one of the sparks for it was having been to Dave's flat and having seen his massive archive. I knew he had loads of pictures from the 80s, most of which hadn't been seen or had only been seen once or twice.
Wow.
But many of which hadn't been seen at all. So I kind of wanted to tap into that, and I knew that Dave had been a big fan through the 80s, so could contribute to the book as well. You were right in your review yesterday, by the way. I did write it.
Okay.
I wrote it, but Dave provided some very useful material for some reminiscences that were very useful. He wrote the foreword, provided all the pictures, of course. and also gave me some very useful notes that kept me in check on one particular occasion, when I was tempted to start talking about drugs a little too much. And Dave very usefully said, no, best not go down that route, really. So I didn't.
Great.
So,
Yeah.
I'm curious for both of you, because Stephen and I chimed in on these thoughts of ours yesterday when we did the review. I were curious to know, what were a couple of your forehead slapping moments of information maybe you learned separately from each other that you didn't know before you started putting this book together?
Oh, there's lots for me, and some of it was provided by Dave. The pictures in the book of the cinema rehearsals, they were a kind of a woo moment for me, and David's reminiscences of that, because nobody saw that. Nobody was there apart from Dave, John D, and some guys from the record company. Right. So to have access to somebody that was in those rehearsals was amazing, really.
Yeah, that's
so that was the big one for me. And actually being able to use Dave's pictures from it as well.
Yeah, because they just haven't been put. They were only in the box set, I think, of Yes or something.
Yeah.
We got lucky there. We got lucky. There's only John and I there.
Yeah.
Interesting. And David, for you, in your journey of putting all this together, whether it was before getting with Stephen Lambe or while you were collaborating, were there a couple things that stand out that you came across that were like, whoa, I never saw this, or I never knew this little fact, something like that?
Do you know what? I'm not sure there's one that stands out at the moment.
Really?
Yeah. I sort of. I lived it. I lived the 80s.
Bullshit answer.
Yeah.
Bullshit answer.
No,
yeah,
no. Just kidding.
Dave, just make something up. Make them a fact. No one will know. The Rick Wakeman stressing episode. Anything you like. That's a.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I did know that Rick Wakeman did a lot of albums, right? Yeah. And I wasn't quite into them, but I'm not quite sure I realised just how many albums. Because I kind of they blended in a little bit for me in the 1980s, and he lost his way a little, and I lost my way a little with Rick. So reading the book and going through it and preparing and just going, another Rick Wakeman album, another one. So there was a bit of that, which
I listened to all those albums, so you don't have to.
Steve, how about you?
You're a good guy.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to bring up is I found it interesting and cool how the book goes through Rick's career of that decade. But one thing I was kind of surprised about was that it didn't go through Bill Bruford's career in that decade. And I was wondering if the reasoning was that he wasn't technically a member of Yes during that decade, despite being a major player in ABWH. Like, what was it?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. I noted that down from your review, and it's a totally fair question. I think you have to find your logic somewhere when you're doing a book like this. So I decided to take as my logic. Okay, here are 5 members of Yes, as Yes was on the 1st of January 1980, and the lineup was John Anderson, Chris Squire, Rick Wakeman, Steve Howe, and Alan White on the 1st of January. Right. So that's the lineup of Yes we start with, and then we'll take them all off on their various journeys through the 80s, and we'll add in some various other characters as the 80s wear on, but we won't dwell necessarily too long on those. So you, again, made a very fair point about Jeff Downes and Asia. Mm-hmm. The fact that I talk about the first 2 Asia albums, and then I don't talk about the rest of Jeff's career. And I don't talk very much about Trevor's production career. 2 reasons for that. One is because that would just too much material.
I think Steve pointed out either on the show or to me, said that could be a whole other book.
Exactly. So and going back to Bill Bruford briefly, Bill had an amazingly busy 80s. And I'm a big fan of all that stuff. But again, you know, if I'd have put in all the stuff that Bill did, 2 albums with Patrick Moraz, I think, as well.
Yeah.
But I put in all those stuff. The book would have been ridiculously long and would have gone off at lots of different tangents.
Yeah.
So
not as focused on Yes in the 1980s.
Yeah, like
So
500 pages or something.
Yeah, I wanted to keep it as yesy as possible as well.
Yeah.
So those first 2 Asia albums, it's Jeff and it's Steve Howe.
Right.
Steve then leaves after the first, well, gets kicked out after the first couple of albums. We're doing rehearsals for the next one. So then we kind of lose a little bit. It's just Jeff's thing then. So I just ease away from that for the time being. In the same way that I don't really talk about Trevor Horn's production career, because that's massive. You know, he's having massive hits and things like that. And he just comes back in again when I start talking about 90125. In the same, you know, I could have talked about Patrick Moraz. I could have talked a little bit about Tony Kaye as well. Could have even talked about Peter Banks, you know, but you have to draw a line somewhere. I think my logic works, I think, but it's my logic, if you see what I mean. So hopefully...
No, and that's fair. Yeah. The analogy I like to use is that if you have endless land and you have a whole bunch of wandering cattle, you have to put the corral fence in somewhere. And Yes has a lot of wandering cattle. So in order to keep the book focused on really what the spirit of it is in the title, your logic to me makes sense, because otherwise it just goes out in so many directions and there might not be any way back. You know, oops, someone ate the breadcrumbs. How do we get back? You know, because there's just so much there.
Yeah, and when I was in 8th or 9th grade, you know, I'm so like into Yes. So like back then I was even considering like writing my own like scripts for movies about the career of Yes, like, you know, like drama movies or whatever. But what I wrote was pretty freaking terrible, because I would just like extract every little nugget from every single interview, like every contribution to every album outside of Yes. It just wouldn't have worked even if it was like 7 movies. So I totally get what you mean about drawing the line. And it
still has to be fun and fit the format as well. So, you know, it's got to fit the format. It can't go. I mean, who's worse than Yes with all the branches? I mean, you know, it's crazy, isn't it? So you've got to package it for 80s. And you were surprised at what's in the 80s, which, like you say, you just think Trevor Rabin on stage, Tony Kaye, crazy squire looking, and it's not.
It's so much more. Yeah,
Stephen has done a great job in packaging the 80s.
Yeah, that was my biggest forehead slapping experience of reading the book was I didn't think of so many of these things. So that made it, and you used the word, David, it made it fun to read because it was way beyond what I perceived it to be about, which was great. I was very pleasing. And never in the history of music has there been a band around for over 50 years that can't keep the same lineup 2 albums in a row. Even though the same lineups have reconverged, never have they done more than 2 albums with the same lineup in a row. And what is that? Give us more to talk about, more to write about, more to read about. I mean, talk about a soap opera. Jeez. Only Jethro Tull might match that institutionalized version of a band, right?
I mean, if we can't talk about Yes for hours on end, you know, who else? I mean, it's never ending.
We'd have to talk about beer and cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to say that Yes is my favorite soap opera, pretty much the only soap opera I keep up with.
And the 80s are the most soap opera-y of the decades as well. It's a great, people fall out with each other, they're throwing stuff at each other, the wives fall out, which is touched on a little bit in the book, but not too much, thankfully. And it is a crazy decade. And they never really recover from the 80s, I don't think. I think they patch things up periodically, but the divisions that began at the start of the 80s are never quite healed, I don't think, as well.
That's a great point. They re-achieved superstardom and then never got back to it again, with all due respect. You know, they have their fans, they have their tribe, they have their community, but they never reached, you know, they'll never book I shouldn't say never, but they haven't since booked multiple dates at Madison Square Gardens and the LA Forum and, you know, things like that. So it's interesting. And I know that there's other factors, you know, the economy and times have changed and people don't spend, but they still didn't reach the same superstardom. And I'm okay with that because that's never been a reason to follow them, you know, of course. But do you guys have a favorite, if you had to pick just one favorite tour that you saw in person, what might that be? And what was your first? If you could start with that, please. First time you saw them live, and what's your favorite tour?
But we talking the 80s, yeah?
Any throughout their whole career.
Any era.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, you go first.
Well, I started in 70. I started liking Yes in 76, but my first gig was 77.
Okay.
So that was pretty spectacular. But the greatest gig was Wembley 78. The most phenomenal gig was 78. But I absolutely loved 84 at Wembley. I love 80s, yes. It was bonkers. Yeah, I couldn't believe what was happening, to be honest.
Yeah.
90125, I thought it was great.
Yeah.
How about you, Stephen?
Well, my first Yes concert was my first concert of any sort, actually, which was Wembley in 78. Though I think I went on the Friday evening. So, and that completely blew my mind because it was my first concert experience of any sort.
Wow.
Any sort. And I soon realized that they weren't all like that. But I agree with Dave, actually. I think the 84 tour, when again, we both saw them at Wembley, that completely blew my mind. I guess it kind of should, it's not a very fashionable thing to say about Yes, was that you know, that seeing the Rabin lineup was probably the best experience. But I think in terms of how much I enjoyed it and how incredible I thought it was, that might actually be my greatest Yes experience.
So for both of you, what is that common denominator that makes that so stand out for you? Was it the playing, the production? What was it?
I think that it's certainly not my favorite period of Yes by any means. My favorite album's Close to the Edge, funnily enough.
And this makes your answers almost really more interesting too.
So, but I think there was something about the vibe on the night as much as anything. I mean, not that there wasn't a vibe. There's been a great vibe at every Yes concert I've been to. But I think the vibe on the night, I think there were different people in the audience. It wasn't kind of all sort of young men with long hair and trench coats.
It was more. I remember John Anderson saying once they got Trevor, it's the first time they saw girls in the first 10 rows.
Yeah, there were girls there. There were girls there, and it was. I think there was a slightly different. There was a slightly more excitable vibe in the audience. That made the actual experience of watching them. Of course, there was a big show as well. You know, if you saw Yes in the Round in 78,
that was my
great
first
show. It was a great show, but it was them in the round in the middle of the arena. Yeah, with the 80s, the 80s were a great thing for a show. So there were ramps and there was little showcase when they
that weird shaped stage. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. More colorful, like the stage and the outfits.
There was the clothes and the makeup as well. Believe it or not, you know.
John's weird belt pack microphone with the coiled. That was just space age at the time.
Chris Squire's big fuzzy thing that he was wearing. It was
and the doctor outfit.
I think it was the show. I mean, I went to the Union tour as well, and that was great. And I really enjoyed them later.
Alan
as well.
with the sequins, yes.
Yeah.
You know, the Simmons.
Yeah. But I think for some reason the 84 one just lingered longest. I think it was just the excitement of the evening. It may not even have been the music. It might well have just been the excitement of being there that's actually lingered.
That's interesting.
Yeah, like as a kid, I remember I thought Trevor Rabin's like colorful outfit and that guitar that he uses were like the coolest thing ever.
It's interesting.
It is the coolest thing ever, but it's very odd that we've just chosen 84. No, we're talking about the 80s, obviously. So maybe that's just in there because you know Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and Howe was a great show.
I didn't go to that one
for the 1980s.
Wait,
but like
Stephen
you
Lambe,
got close to
go
the edge,
I didn't. I to this day I don't know why.
Okay, I was going to ask if you weren't in favor of it or something.
No. I bought the album and I liked it. it was just a period of my life, I think, where I didn't coordinate going to that tour. I really should have gone. I think I was just elsewhere, really, just mentally elsewhere, probably. But I went to the Union tour 2 years later. So it was just, so you drift in and out sometimes. And as I say, I bought the album and really liked it. I bought it on vinyl. Some reason I didn't go to the tour. But no, it wasn't a policy thing.
Okay.
It was just I just didn't go for some reason. I have no idea why now.
But the USA got more Yes than we did in England.
Like throughout, you mean, right? Like
throughout the 80s, you got a lot more Yes than we did.
Why is that?
Yeah, you got a big generator tour.
And 90s.
Yeah.
Why?
You're sounding bitter.
You've always had it because it's a big country. It's 50 times bigger than ours. And there's a lot of money there.
But I always perceived Europe as a big tour mecca for rock bands, and especially prog rock, no? And being that they're
but
from
it's
the UK,
it's second from the US, though. It's second to you guys.
Yeah. We didn't get the big generator tour at all.
Right, yeah.
Really?
And Talk.
Remember
and
that.
Talk.
No, exactly. Yeah, we didn't get Talk either. At all.
Wow. I have a comment on the Talk tour. And I can't believe I'm saying this about one of my two favorite bands, but I saw them at the Greek Theater, and it's the only time I could not believe how good Alan White's drums did not sound. The sound was just not good, and it's a great venue. I've seen other shows there, but the audio there just wasn't that good. I liked the show, but didn't sound like Alan's drums.
That's the reason to go to 3 gigs on a tour, because you don't know if some big guy's going to sit in front of you, the guy's going to chat next here, the sound's bouncing off something. If you go to 3 at least, you're going to get one really good one out of the 3.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've only been to 3 concerts once and on the tour, and that was in 2004 actually, and they were all completely different as well.
Yeah, that's what I find. That's why I do it.
Well, no, they were completely different in tone as well. I saw them at Wembley Arena doing the really long set. I saw them doing a shorter set in a castle somewhere in Devon. But I also went to that acoustic that Rick Wakeman arranged an acoustic set for them in Oxford. A completely unique. It's a bit like that acoustic DVD.
Yeah, guaranteed no hiss.
Yes, it's very like that, but a slightly extended version of it. So they did about an hour and a half playing acoustically with some of Rick Wakeman's mates doing comedy sets in the first half.
I was just thinking that it's easier for me to say go to 3 gigs in the UK when if you're in the States, of course, the traveling distance.
Right, yeah.
It's between states.
Yeah, depending on where you live. Depending on where you live, because I have seen some bands like in a row. Like I remember seeing Yes a couple times on the same tour, but when they came back around and played in the same area, not like the next night, I had seen Rush a few times more than one night in a row, either at the same venue or somewhere not that much farther, things like that. But if you're in an area like, well, where I live, no one plays, but I'm 100 miles from Phoenix. So if I'm going to go to a show there, it's a whole day thing, especially if I'm going to do an interview for Drum Talk TV. I have to get there around lunch. We go to the sound check, we do the interview there, then go to dinner, then the show, we get home at like 2 a.m. It's like, I got to reserve a whole day. Well, we have. You got to book a hotel. You got to do the whole thing. And then there's people that live in the Midwest, where it's just
but you guys
distance.
It's so big.
Yeah, when I studied abroad in England a few years ago, like Brighton and London were basically like right next to each other. You just walk, you're there in a few minutes. No, I'm kidding. But it is a shorter distance, though.
It's only an hour.
It's 45 minutes by train to an hour. Yeah. So that's easy.
And that is easy, yeah. I've driven a lot farther than that for shows, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think of, and we'll get back to the book, but what do you guys think of what's going on now, the present Yes? Will you be writing about Yes in the 2020s? Do you think? I mean, the story's still unfolding, who knows, but What do you think of what's going on and the
Well,
most
no,
recent
well-
the Quest and all that?
But you never know what's going to happen with Yes, though,
Right.
for sure,
Right.
right? So I know we said something earlier that wouldn't happen. Okay, that was like the big stadiums, right? But
Right.
if someone just give them £1 million each and said, all 8 of you, right, 3 nights at Wembley, right, you're all going on stage, then we're back at Wembley in the O2, you see. So,
You know what,
You know.
though? Would they? Because Led Zeppelin
Aha.
at the O2 sold out in like 10 minutes, and then they were offered $100 million to go do a tour, and they said no. So who
hey, I
knows?
tell you, we might never know, but
You're
it's
right.
Yes.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah,
How
no, I
many
think-
times has Rick Wakeman been in and out of the band? 6? 5 times.
5.
So 6
Yeah.
is coming. Ooh, that's a prophecy.
You can't write Yes is history.
Yeah, you
It's
couldn't
bonkers.
make this up.
You couldn't make it up.
Yeah.
No, I think they're entitled to be doing what they're doing. And
Sure.
That's totally fine. I mean, some people don't call it Yes, and some people do.
And that's the
you know.
thing, you hit it on the head, Stephen, is it's not for us to say who Yes is or what's really Yes. It is what it is at that time, period. Has nothing to do with which version you favor, doesn't
Yeah.
determine which Yes is yes or not. And people are certainly entitled to what they like, but to say that that's not Yes, that's like doesn't even really compute. I understand that, but Steve, are people like commenting right now on all this stuff? Let us know if there's questions or anything. But yeah, I like how you put that. They're certainly entitled to do what they want. They're doing what they do for themselves first. I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think they are. It's just that you just can't really plan.
Right.
I know they've got the longest lineup at the moment that's ever been,
Yeah.
and it looks very solid, and they're all very happy.
But there's still
So-
only 2 albums in.
yes,
Yeah,
I think yeah.
And I do
I
think
think
there's
the-
going to be a
Well, like
big
one
change
album
before the
and-
next one.
Yeah.
Or one
Well-
album in, Steve? One?
Yeah, the Quest lineup. This is the only
This is the
album
first
they've done.
album.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right. I was thinking Heaven and Earth.
Yeah, no, Chris was around back then.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so we'll see what happens. I think there'll be a change though by the next album.
Yeah,
Right.
well, a
You
forced
mean
change.
you mean a change in personnel or a change in
Personnel.
style?
Yeah.
Well, you think that Alan White?
forced.
I think
Basically,
Alan's going to retire.
Yeah, I think everyone was pretty astonished that he actually played all the drums on the Quest. To be
Yeah.
honest,
Right.
and he does a pretty good job as far as I can tell.
He
He's not
does.
playing anything that's particularly taxing.
Right. And it's also different than going on tour and playing most nights of the week and the travel and all the,
Yeah.
I don't, bless his heart. I love him. I've known him since 1989. He's been on my show 5-6 times. He got our first Prague Legacy Award a couple years ago at the NAMM show. I love him to death. And I don't, that has nothing to do with the fact that I think he might be ready to just not do it anymore.
Yeah, I think his presence is quite important.
Yeah.
It's more talismanic, isn't it, more than being there to play?
Yeah.
Because he's a link.
He's
a
been
link
in
to
the band
classic
longer
era.
than anybody, including Steve Howe.
Yeah,
Steve was there first, but Alan's been there through over a decade longer than Steve.
Yeah.
So he's very iconic when it comes to who is Yes.
It's still pretty solid, isn't it? It's just, there's
Yeah.
no wavering at the moment for the foreseeable
Right.
future.
Yeah.
So
But they're not grooming Jay Shellen to just play tambourine and castanets on the side. There's a bigger plan. And
Yeah.
we just don't know
Yeah.
when that's going to be.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
That may well be.
But Alan's
Yeah.
been, to me personally, he's been an immense influence, not just drumming wise, but musically and just as a person. I mean, he, for a long
Yeah.
time through the 80s, he lived in the neighborhood where I grew up. And I did not grow up in a money area, believe me, I did not. But he lived 2 blocks from where my parents were living when I grew up. And when I first met him and got to know him at his house, I showed up one day and he had on a scuba tank and Speedos. And I this was like July, and I said, Alan, in America, we celebrate Halloween in October. And he laughed. He said, yeah, my neighbor's got a drain problem in their pool, so I can go down and fix it. It's just the kind of guy he is. You know, he's just a wonderful, regular guy. He's just so down to earth. His kids went to the local school right there in the neighborhood. And that's one of the things I admire about him. I really appreciate that. In a world where sometimes our hearts are broken when we meet an idol or someone that we look up to and they're just not who we thought they were. Like your book, Alan way over delivered as a human being. He really did.
Yeah. No,
he's bigger than, I mean, all the drummers are always important in bands, aren't they? But he's bigger than people realize.
Yeah.
Because he's a quiet man of Yes, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's the quiet, solid backbeat of Yes.
Yeah.
Forever, you know.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So
absolutely.
we'll see.
Yeah, not the guy's a lovely guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's next for you guys? Do you have another Yes book planned or that you've talked about or that you'd like to do? Other than Trevor Horn's extensive lexicon of what he's produced over the years.
Well, Stephen's got a plan for next year, I think.
Well, well,
in the Yes world,
there's always lots of ideas. I mean, obviously, we are doing Yes in the 90s, which you mentioned in the review. I'm just publishing that. Simon Barrow's writing it.
Okay.
So that will probably be out in the USA at the start of next year. I would have thought it might make the UK at the end of this. I think Simon's due to. I don't know. I don't want to speak for him, but he's due to deliver it in the summer. So we'll see how that turns out. Dave and I have been talking about a few things as well. I mean, I'm not planning on writing anything on Yes myself in the next year, just because I've got another project planned for me. And I'm so busy anyway that writing stuff is actually becoming more and more difficult because I'm so busy running a publishing company. Dave and I have been talking about a few things. There's a couple of things, but I don't know.
It takes a bit more work. I haven't kind of got my head around it fully yet. We need to speak more before I commit, because if I commit, then I know.
Then you got to get on with it. Yeah.
I've got to get on with it and do it properly for a year or two, and so it's right. And so I've got the material now for that, which is so it just needs to get my head around. I have just completed another really, well, I think it's a great article, which will be coming out soon. So that's very timely.
Great, let us know.
You should see that on, you should see it on Yes World at some point soon. Okay. So I've just finished that.
Right.
So that should be, But the book-wise, I've got an idea. I've had it for a decade. And now I have the material. I've just got to get on with it, really.
Yeah.
If either of you could select one Yes member, past or present, to sit with and write a biography with one member, who might that be?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I'd like to sit down and write a proper biography of Rick Wakeman.
Wow.
A proper biography of Rick Wakeman, because he's done one. He's done the Say Yes thing that he did a few years ago, and there's been other biographies, and he's done his books of anecdotes as well. But he's never really sat down and written a proper detailed biography that talks about the music in a lot of detail, and that would be great, I think. Great. So that would be my personal choice. I've always been a massive Rick Wakeman fan. Obviously, the quality can be variable sometimes. I think he'd probably be the first to admit.
Yeah.
But I'd love to sit down with him. So that would be my first choice, I think.
Great. How about you, Dave?
Well, John started his own book, don't you? You saw that like about 3 years ago, and this lovely 10 pages came out, very artistically done, and that looked good, but that's faded away. Now, I suppose it would be John. I think there's such a lot to be said for John, not necessarily just his career, because that goes off into all sorts of places, but maybe a lyrics something to do with lyrics and telling something that's not been told before. I think there's a lot to be told from his side about what he means with his lyrics and go through. In my head, I can see him telling the stories, a bit like Paul McCartney's just done with his recent release, where we can talk about the actual big tracks, not all of Yes, but the big one. There's enough of those in 50 years.
Oh yeah.
To or even just his biggest tracks, and tell us what he was thinking and what it actually means and the links and where it came from, because that's not really been done. And also, is the lyrics are great with images. Yeah. That's probably never going to happen. But I think there's more to be taught, because look at John's career with Yes and without Yes. Is that mine's the only book on John Anderson in 50 years. And it's not even covering Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's covering pre-Yes and the first year of Yes. So he's got a whole life to tell. Yeah. And, it's not been told. So that would be, yeah.
Steve, how about you? Have you ever thought of this?
I would probably go with John Anderson as well, because there's just so much unreleased works that I'm so fascinated by, like what he was working on in this period and that period, that some has seen the light of day, some hasn't. But yeah, that would be an interesting project, like even asking about the lyrics and being like, so John, what were you thinking?
Yeah, what does gold stainless nail and the time between the notes relates to I want to ask about what
yeah.
That topic alone could be a whole book, let alone, like you both said, his life that is so untold.
But his answer may just be, well, that's just some words I put together.
Well, I have heard him say something like that. I've heard him say something like he wrote words almost as if they were notes of an instrument that just flowed and rhymed and
or if they were
sort
like
of told a story. What's that, Steve?
Or like colors of a painting.
Yeah. But I know there's other layers to that story. I'm sure there is.
Yeah. So you've got his artwork, you've got his stories, you've got the lyrics,
and his life. Imagery. There's spiritual influences.
There's a book there. Yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
It hasn't been done because it's probably too difficult. But difficult things get done in the end if someone's willing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But if I had to choose someone other than John Anderson, I would think, it might be interesting doing a book on, and I don't know if this has been done before because I haven't heard of one, but a book on Trevor Rabin, like what was like being a rock star and then going into film scores.
Well, starting with boy band to rock star to film score, there's kind of some layers there. And from South Africa,
Sounds like Stephen's on it already, I think.
Yeah. Mine would be probably, I think, like as much as, of course, I'm a drummer, I cover the drumming world and all that. Believe it or not, I think my first choice would probably be John Anderson as well, for all the same reasons that were already put out there. However, if I found out that Dave and Stephen were collaborating on that, I would choose someone else. And I think if Chris were alive, it would be him. Otherwise, I believe it would be Rick. I'm a huge Rick Wakeman fan. I love his diversity in life. He had a cooking show. I had a cooking show. There's the comedy, the game show host. Like really? He's everywhere doing everything, and then, let me play something at Hampton Court. It's like, yeah. So I think Rick would be next on my list, probably.
And he's bounced back so many times over the years as well.
Yeah.
He's been ill or he's been bankrupt.
He and I can relate with all the marriages.
Yeah.
And he's in fine form at the moment.
He is, yeah.
Yeah.
Steve's mom is my favorite ex-wife, by the way. We're still very close.
Yeah.
We're not going to go down that route, are we?
Right. Yeah.
And we haven't swore yet at all. We're very good.
That's fucking amazing.
No.
Oh man.
The one time Steve let go of the slack on the leash. See, Steve?
Yeah, it's all my fault. Yeah.
Well, guys, we really enjoyed the book, and it was an honor to have you on and be able to talk about it and your experiences. Keep us up to date with the other things that you're doing, and we'd love to.
Can I drop a couple of things in for you? Just
Absolutely.
Last minute.
Yeah.
I went digging in the boxes of goodies. Okay, so 1980s. I just wanted a couple of things. So, sweatshirt.
Nice.
Okay.
Very cool.
Wow.
Sweatshirt from England.
Yeah, it says Yes Shows 1980.
Nice.
Right. So as we're in the 80s, and also a couple of rarities for you. So.
Oh wow.
Okay, so it's Yes 90125. Is that a vinyl sleeve for 90125? I've never seen one that looked like that.
Oh, and a lithograph on the back.
Yeah.
So
I've never
shows the
seen that. What's that?
So the South American.
Oh wow.
South American vinyl.
Wow.
That's a huge collector's item.
Okay, so I thought I'd show because they take forever to find. Okay.
That's worth like at least $40. I'm kidding. I'm sure it's worth a lot.
Hang on, and one more thing for you.
Yeah.
Just in the 1980s. Okay, just the same South American.
Oh,
Whoa.
ABWH again with the members in black and white, and
They threw a lot of money at those covers, didn't they?
They sure did.
So yeah.
Nice.
So I thought you might like a few 80s things thrown in.
Very impressive. Very cool. Cool. Stay
I got
on the
nothing.
line after we say goodbye. We'll chat for a moment, and then I got to get ready for Cindy Blackman's interview today on Drum Talk TV. Little plug there. Join me on Drum Talk TV at 4 p.m. Pacific. Is that right? Yeah, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern U.S. times, live on Drum Talk TV. Cindy Blackman Santana, getting caught up with her for the first time in, gosh, it's been almost a couple of years, year and a half. That'll be fun. But we'd love to stay up to date with what you two gentlemen are doing in the Yes verse. And thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for following what we do and dig into the library. There's probably a lot of episodes you haven't seen. This is episode 41, not counting about 15 news desk episodes. You could follow us on Facebook for the visual aspect at facebook.com/Yesshift if you don't want to look at us. But there's a lot of clips and pictures and things like David just showed us from time to time. If you'd rather listen to us while you're jogging, working out, doing whatever you do, you can follow us on the anchor.fm channels at anchor.fm/Yesshift. And Steve, they can write to us if they have hate mail. Is that right?
yeah, they can email yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com, and we might read your feedback on the show if it's good to print. I guess like if we like it enough to read it, and it's we're probably on most podcatchers. You can just like look up Yesshift, and if you want to support us, you could go to anchor.fm/Yesshift and click support. And I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah, it's $1,000 minimum. All right. So just kidding. Thanks, everybody. And thank you guys. We'll see you all again soon.